All right, hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's Esports and Wizards NBA 2K Global Partnership Summit. I'll be your host tonight, Dan Nolan of Monumental Sports Network, and we have a collection of great qualified individuals tied to the world of esports, and you'll hear from a collection of them throughout tonight's festivities. We're going to start, of course, with a launch of the 2K League, hearing about this, then a more specific look into Wizards gaming, and then we'll wrap with a great panel on esports and Wizards NBA 2K. But first, we have some introductory remarks from the founder, chairman, majority owner, and CEO of Monumental Sports and Entertainment. He knows a thing or two about the tech industry. That would be Mr. Ted Leonsis.
Thank you for coming. It's so great to welcome so many friends and partners here to Capital One Arena. Hopefully you'll stick around and go to the Caps game this evening. And I wanted to kick this off by talking a little bit about the power of the NBA and the NBA platform and how it's tied to really what I see as the ascension of indoor sports. Indoor sports are going to be the most valuable franchises on the sports and entertainment landscape, mostly because we can offer within our buildings high fidelity for wireless connectivity. We can have high-speed cameras tracking everything, the ability to just control through video and present games in a non-stop way is going to be really, really important. And so the NBA is really the fastest growing and we think the most important emerging brand on a global basis. And the platform that's being developed consists of men's basketball. That's the NBA as we know it. You'll soon see a much more strategic emphasis on developmental league, now called the G League. And we can see how the G League, we just announced our team on Friday, the Capital City Go-Go, will become very strategic to the platform and to each of the teams from a development standpoint, but also for a way to reach a larger audience and that we can do more programming, more monitoring, more generating of the data. We have a women's basketball league, WNBA. We own and operate the Washington Mystics. We have the Summer League, and now we're launching an esports extension. And why esports is so important is that there are 7 billion people on the planet. About closing in on 5 billion of the 7 billion have some kind of connectivity, mostly through their mobile phone or device. There's only 350 million connections in the US. So we have become nationally a small part of the overall global footprint for the internet. And when you look at where the big companies have created all of the value, be it Apple, be it Alibaba, be it Tencent, be it Amazon, be it Alphabet, Google, all of their growth is coming from outside of the US. So turning all of our businesses and brands outward instead of inward, no walls up, going out to the largest audience that we can, younger, more diverse women is what the NBA is all about. And esports allows us to tap into truly the fastest growing, most important segment of the entertainment business. I go way back in the field. I was with America Online. We got America Online. AOL was started in 1988. In 1987, before it was called America Online, it was called Quantum Computer Corporation. And it was founded as an Atari multi-user game network. We basically connected people from around the country who wanted to find multi-user game way of connecting and playing and building their own communities. And when AOL first launched, Most of our traffic was at night, and the majority of our traffic at night was men playing video games, and in the day, it was women playing casual card games and horoscope games and ways to just connect. And so the communities that get built, the truly authentic relationships that get built in multi-user gaming is really, really important to our economy and to this next generation who we have to reach. I'll also say what's amazing about esports is that once you get introduced and hooked to a game, you do it for life. And I think it was about 15 years ago when the video game business surpassed Hollywood in terms of revenues, because $100 million will get spent to make a movie, and you film 100 hours and they edit it down to 90 minutes, and you go to the movie theater. I used to go to the movie theater one time and pay $10 to watch the movie. A video game, a great video game, can also take about $100 million to make, but it's infinite in its delivery. And now, because you're no longer delivering physically, because it's released online and updated in a real-time way, there is infinite time, infinite stories, infinite character development, infinite worlds for you to get involved with. And because of that new model, as bandwidth has become more and more available, and because this industry, more than any other, follows Moore's law, faster, better, cheaper, essentially till it's free, the best games are offered for free. It would be like us saying, come to the Caps game tonight. The game is free. Oh, you want to watch from this angle with clean glass? That's $10. You want a beer? That's $25. You want to be able to watch the scoreboard? That's $5. You want to watch the... And that's what this whole industry has become. Great adoption and usage with very innovative upsell. And once someone falls in love with the brand, falls in love with the environment, falls in love with the game, makes the commitment to understand how to play that game, they get hooked for life. And it's analogous to who watches golf on television. It's people who play golf. Very few casual people. I've never played a round of golf in my life or watching golf on TV. Well, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of people around the world are playing video games. And once you start playing video games, you want to share and compete, and you get into multi-user games, and you start to really relate to how difficult it is to master these environments. And the young people that become great and most adept at learning at how to play esports are truly great athletes. That's something that is going to surprise people. I remember there was this big argument 15 years ago where NASCAR race car drivers athletes. What do? They're in the car and they're steering. And of course they're great athletes. Hand-eye coordination, stamina, the ability to judge space and time, the risk-taking that's involved, how physically in shape you have to be, how the team has to come together to bring the cars in shape. You know, you see now how fast it is to get a car in and out. There's no more discussion about whether NASCAR people in the pit and NASCAR drivers are athletes, and it became a relatively big and important industry. You could argue that esports, someone asked, do you think esports is going to take its place amongst the major sport leagues? And I think that's missing the point. I think very quickly, esports will be the largest participatory sport business industry with the most active participants, the most dollars compared to any sport. It will dwarf the NFL, it'll dwarf the NBA, because first and foremost, it is a global phenomenon. China, Korea, all of the Asian nations, they are early adopters there first. I joked with someone the other day, my son Zach, who will speak later, was a good student and he was a good athlete and he was always playing video games with his friends. And one Saturday I came downstairs and he and his friends had been up all night saving the universe and saving the planet by killing aliens. And I said, "What are you doing? Shut that off. Go upstairs, go hit some golf balls, shoot some baskets, do your homework, stop playing video games." In Korea, you'll see a kid playing tennis, and his mother comes outside and says, "What are you doing? You'll never be a pro tennis player. Go downstairs, do your homework, play esports. You got a shot at making a lot of money and having a great career being in the esports business." And just like soccer, which is we have kind of a football poor man's derivative here, we still haven't taken off where it's endemic in Europe and other parts of the world. That's what we are in fear of happens here, that we don't have yet the great players. And so I'm very, very proud of the NBA for embracing esports. We put our hand up here in Washington to say we want to be one of the first in. We made an investment separately outside of what you're going to see off of the NBA platform. Peter Guber, who is one of the owners of the Dodgers and the Golden State Warriors, and we led the acquisition of a company that owns Team Liquid. And Team Liquid is one of the endemic esports teams. We treat them with great respect because these are young people that are helping to birth an industry. You'll hear later today from some people who have been there from the beginning to help develop and build a whole new industry. Now, we can add some value because we've been exposed to so many sports leagues and what happens with the players and the coaching and what's needed to make the industry successful. But I've said we need to have a light touch and not get in the way because this industry is taken off. And as I look around the room, we're mostly baby boomers and millennials. I don't see a lot of Gen Xers here. I'm old. I remember watching the Beatles the first time on television on the Ed Sullivan Show. And I use that analogy because it was like two worlds were happening. My mom and dad were watching black and white television and the Lawrence Welk Show. Broadway songs, accordions, and then the Beatles showed up. And this whole new industry and world started. I was there at the birth of the PC movement. I helped to introduce the IBM PC. I then worked with Steve Jobs and the people at Apple on introducing the Macintosh. I was one of the first people in the world to get online. We got America online. Every one of those changes was huge. I would say going from World War II to the 60s, free love, rock and roll, big societal change. Giving everyone a personal computer and enabling everybody to have democracy in the palm of their hands, another huge movement. Getting people online and leveling the playing field for everyone. When I got online, there were less than 1 million people online. Today, as I said, there's close to 4 billion. It's become oxygen. We all had to get used to it. It is the utility that we live our life on, and that happened really, really fast. You are going to see the same kind of phenomenon on esports. We are going to wake up in a cycle much faster, and esports will be the predominant sport, and you will see derivatives and applications of esports and competition and tournaments by verticals and by leagues. So that the NBA has embraced this, that the NBA is trying to do this in the right way. We'll start in a conservative fashion. We'll activate our fan bases. We want to do the right thing in the right way. And after we get that right, then we'll be able to do endemic kinds of things. And you'll hear that positioning a lot on, is this endemic and authentic versus is it a part of the platform and just being an extension on the platform? Most of the times when a new media or something brand new and global emerges, it's not the people in the previous wave that make that transition. So we have that challenge that I think we're up to, but as an example, Rolling Stone magazine, which basically is being given away, it didn't create MTV. Sports Illustrated didn't launch and create ESPN. It didn't make that leap from one media, one mode of business to the next. Most of the time, it's the new brands, it's the attacking younger entrepreneurs that make for a new industry. We kind of did that at AOL for a decade. We were the #1 performing stock on the New York Stock Exchange for a decade by essentially saying everything that was analog in media will become digital, and you will be able to do things faster, better, cheaper online. And so the NBA right now, this is an extension to the platform, using our brands, our players, our platforms, our teams to get into this market. But I think it's just our first step. As sponsors, as advertisers, as media partners, as employees, this is a very, very important area for you to get up to speed and knowledgeable about. And the confluence of the big new things that will happen to create new revenues and growth, like gaming and fantasy and gambling. Today, the Supreme Court, it was a technical term, they leaned in to saying that you will be able to do sports betting legally as a consumer in the light of day. Well, you can imagine what will happen if you can start to game and gamble in a transparent, accountable way in esports, where there's infinite things that can happen, and you're already on a digital, accountable platform. We know that big data is the next big thing that is happening to fuel all of our businesses. And every sport, be it basketball, hockey, football, there are so many things happening that you're measuring and metricing, and you're seeing people being able to bet on not who's going to win the game, but what's going to happen on the next play. What is each person on the field going to do on that next play? And that you can game and gamble and settle up in real time. Well, watch a esports tournament, watch a professional esports player who is processing and doing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hand-eye coordination tasks in a 60-second in a minute. Compare that to like football. Watched some games yesterday. 3-hour game, 10 minutes of play. 3 seconds on the play, 30 seconds to pick everybody up, go back into the huddle. Just watch esports and see the amount of things that are going on, the amount of characters, the amount of action, and imagine all of the data that's being generated, what can be reported, how people can be trained, what you'll be able to game and eventually gamble on. So data, legalized gaming and gambling, esports will probably create the biggest new opportunity in sports and entertainment in our lifetime. And it's thrilling to do this kickoff event for all of you. And I want to now bring this back to Dan so we can kick off. And I hope you find this productive. And this will just be the start of a long journey together. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Leonsis. Before we continue with today's program, I want to make sure that we welcome all of our viewers on Monumental Sports Network as well as Twitch. And remember, there is a piece of paper in front of everyone on their table. If you'll take a look on here, there is a hashtag, Wizards 2K Summit. Continue to be active in the conversation throughout today's event, and you'll be entered for a chance to, drum roll please, enter, win a chance to get 2 tickets to a future MSE event, and all by just doing hashtag Wizards 2K Summit. As we move on today, we're going to go to the launch of the NBA 2K League. As Mr. Leonsis mentioned many times, this has become a global phenomenon, and now this is connected to the most popular, or arguably one of the most popular sports leagues in the world in the NBA. And a big part of that is the NBA 2K League. And so I would like to welcome to discuss the state of the NBA 2K League, the introduction, and the excitement surrounding it, Brendan Donahue, the managing director of the NBA 2K League. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks very much, and I want to thank Ted. For those who don't realize, in the sports world, he's a very well-respected sports executive and owner who's had the foresight at really getting ahead of this curve. And you see their investment in esports more broadly is shown by that. And so I'm thrilled to talk to you tonight about the 2K League, the NBA 2K League. And I always think it's best to share why we're excited as a league about this operation. I want to first let you know why I personally am excited. So I've been involved in the NBA for 21 years now. Actually, I spent 13 years on the team side, kind of growing up in the sales and marketing side. And then I spent the last 8 years actually working at the NBA office, really helping teams share best practices and help them drive their business. So kind of the sports business piece has kind of been a part of my DNA, for a couple decades. But what you wouldn't know about me, and how could you, is if you went to my house on a normal weekend, on a Saturday or Sunday, you're likely to see this. So this is me and my 11-year-old Carter getting after it in our gaming chairs. And honestly, and just like my father would take me to sporting events as a kid, and we'd sit and talk about things. This is our universe. For a long time now, this is our normal Saturday and Sunday. We get after, we're playing 2K, we're playing Overwatch, we're playing other video games. But I think what's cool about Carter's situation is that he knows about the NBA actually through 2K. He knows about the players through 2K. He knows about who's good. He knows about stats actually through 2K, which is remarkable. But it speaks really to the larger opportunity that this league presents. The new doors that it kind of get opened through the NBA 2K League. And I'll show you a couple examples of that. First off, it's, we have on social media, we have 1.4 billion people across the globe that follow the NBA. That now we have a new way to engage them. Many of them are actually outside of North America, and it's a great way for us to engage them. Secondly, there's nearly 200 million esports enthusiasts. Across numerous different titles. This is an opportunity for us to engage them, and an opportunity for all of you in the room as partners to engage them. And that brings us to the last point, which is the sponsorship opportunity. This gives us an opportunity to get in front of an audience, quite honestly, that's been becoming harder and harder for us to get in front of and engage with. So this is all of these really encapsulate the opportunity that we think the NBA 2K League can capture. So I don't want to jump ahead too far. So I want to first start by what exactly are we doing? So what we're doing, there are over 10 million people that are playing NBA 2K League across the world. We are going to find the best 85 NBA 2K players on the planet and bring them together to compete at the highest level. That is what we're at its core. That's exactly what we're doing with this league. And we're thrilled about the opportunity to, we think that level of competition will draw in fans. And it's very funny, oftentimes when I tell people about what we're doing, I'm often asked the question, do you really think people will watch other people play video games? Do you think people will do that? And it cracks me up, because I immediately turn it back on them. I'm like, okay, so answer me this question, though. What do you watch at home on a normal week? And invariably, I hear about shows like this. I couldn't, my idea of cooking a good meal is making cereal. Yet once a week, I'm finding myself and my wife watching Chopped. Or watching, things such as, Property Brothers, buying and selling. These are some of the most popular shows on TV, and it just speaks to the whole notion that, the elite at anything draws in an audience. And this isn't just us having blind optimism. We actually, those of you who don't realize, last year we actually hosted an esports tournament. We hosted the Road to All-Star. And what the Road to All-Star was, we actually had 500,000 competitors at the start of the tournament, 5 people on a team, 100,000 teams. And all of them, it all was a tournament that led to the All-Star game last year in New Orleans. And we streamed the finals, and there were 2 million viewers who watched that. So by no means is this blind optimism. We think this is going to work. We've seen it work now, and that's just kind of one of the things that kind of brought us to this point of being, bullish about actually bringing this to life. And so why are we getting into this, and why this is a good marriage? This actually has been a long time in the making, and Ted did a good job kind of walking us through some of the timeline and through their investment in broader esports. But the 2K game itself has really been leading towards esports now for almost a decade. So about 7 years ago, they allowed people who played 2K to create their own character and actually go in and create their own player, make them look however they wanted, and they called the My Career mode. And then 3 years ago, they took one big step, which was they created Pro-Am, which actually enables players to play 5-on-5 against 9 other human beings. And now that's kind of all led to esports. And then on the flip side, our owners, people like Ted, have led the NBA into this as well. So I don't know if you've seen, but the League of Legends actually is one of the most popular games out there. They just awarded 10 teams to their league they're launching next year. 7 of those teams are actually will be owned by NBA teams, or NBA owners, I should say. So it just speaks to kind of the foresight that our NBA owners have in attacking this opportunity. And the last reason why we're very bullish on this is the success of 2K itself. So you look here. This just shows kind of the hockey stick growth that we're having in terms of the 2K's game sales. This past year sold over 9 million copies. It's actually the best-selling game of all the major sports leagues in North America. And actually this year it's pacing ahead of even the record pace they set last year. So over 9 million copies of the game sold. But what you can't see on here is what's going on in addition to this, which is they offer a free version of the game in China through our partner in Tencent. And there are 35 million registered users of that game in China, which just speaks to the global appetite for the game and kind of the potential exposure you can get through the NBA 2K League team here in DC. And so who is the audience? And I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we have of the 9 million people who own the game, 1.6 million are playing every day for on average 90 minutes a day. 1.6 million playing every day for on average 90 minutes a day. So that's our core audience. We know we're going to get, and we're going to make sure we treat that community the right way and get them passionate about the league. But in addition, there's another 155 million core NBA fans and nearly 200 million esports enthusiasts that we think, with a thoughtful approach, we can bring them into the fold and expose them to the 2K League. And those are the type of audiences that potentially partners would have access to. So why did we partner with 2K? Obviously, we created a game with them, but I can tell you now, and I'm working very closely with the folks at 2K, and the one thing I can tell you is clear right away is that the NBA, we consider ourselves to be a very innovative brand. 2K shares that DNA with us. Whether it is, they allow the facial recognition they allow in the game would actually allow, if you play the game, you can actually put your face on your player. But in addition to that, just by show of hands, who's played the 2K18 game? All right, we got to make sure we change that. We got to get more people playing. But what they launched this year is called the Neighborhood. And what the Neighborhood is, it's remarkable. And they'll have it on actually here if you want to check it out later. You can, as a player, you can create your own player, and then you can walk through the neighborhood. You can lift weights to improve your player's strength. You can go into the practice facility and do drills to improve your skills. You can go talk to your agent. You can go play pickup basketball. It's a completely immersive experience. And all of these are incredible opportunities, and 2K has great sponsorship activation this way. And then clearly the NBA as well. I mean, last year we launched our VR Game of the Week, showing off some of our innovation. And then this year with Nike, we brought out the connected jersey. And the connected jersey actually allows you with your mobile device to engage with exclusive content. If your favorite player is John Wall, you can check out his playlist that he warms up to. It allows you just to engage on a next level, through technology. The other thing I think is very important as it relates to the NBA and 2K's dive into esports is one of the advantages I think we have is that we are really at the intersection of culture with this game. I mean, the NBA and 2K it's a lifestyle brand. So whether it's the players and their excitement about the game, whether it is if you play the game, it's the music you hear, it's the culture, it's fashion, all these things. And so we definitely feel like we're bringing that lifestyle brand forward to the 2K League, which I think will separate us potentially from the rest of esports. So now we'll get to the kind of the brass tacks of the league itself. So as you can see here, 17 teams jumped on board right out of the gates. And I can tell you we've had 3 or 4 other teams that are already interested in getting involved in year 2. So we would expect to expand pretty quickly. A couple of key things to know about the league. First off, oftentimes when you see people play sports video games, they're playing one-on-one. Actually, this league is going to be 5-on-5. So every team is going to have 5 players. So imagine 5 players playing 5 other players, controlling every player on the virtual court. So I mean, it truly, there's no artificial intelligence whatsoever in the game, which truly makes it uniquely an e-sport. Secondly, in year 1, we're going to be playing in a central studio or 2. So while the Washington team will be here in the marketplace, their players will be practicing and doing grassroots events here in the market, we will actually fly all 17 teams into a central studio or 2 during the season for all competitive games. And then third, and this is a very important piece, this is not LeBron James versus Steph Curry. This is not John Wall versus Kevin Durant. In order for us to have a balanced gameplay, we actually have our 85 players will be controlling their own avatar in the game. Because you can't have LeBron James playing against the 5th best starter on another team and have that be fair. So all the players will be controlling on a level basis. That way, the only thing truly separating them will be their stick skills. So now the timeline. So we're just roughly a month away. So in 2018, we will kick off. We will allow people to actually try out for the league, and they'll be able to try out actually online through the game. And so through that process, we may have several 100,000 people trying out for the league, and we're looking to find the best 85 players in the world. And then in March, we're actually going to have a draft. So the 17 teams will get together, and they will draft their 5 players, and they'll be determining who the 85 players are in the league. We expect by early in April, we'll have all the players actually in the 17 markets, and then we'll kick off the season in May. And so. And then the season will be 15 weeks long, and then 2 weeks of playoffs, so 17 weeks in total, with the finals being in mid to late August. And the other thing I'd say too about the actual schedule itself is we wanted to take the best of the NBA and the best of esports in doing this. So you'll see a mix of certain weeks we'll have regular season games, and then other weeks we'll have tournaments. Whether it's March Madness style tournaments or maybe tournaments like EPL in terms of round robin play. So then as it relates to partners, so I think oftentimes people assume that it's headsets or consoles where those types of sponsors are actually getting involved in esports. But actually, that's not the truth at all. In fact, this is just a cross section of different partners that are already involved in esports in some fashion, and many of them we're talking to now. But this is more of a broad picture of esports more broadly. But I have been involved in many of the conversations that we're having in terms of partners and figuring out how to get involved with the 2K League. And I want to just share some of the feedback we've gotten from partners like yourself as they think about how can they thoughtfully approach esports with the help of folks like the Wizards. A couple of things have come out. One is, you see to the left of the screen here, in traditional esports, oftentimes, if you've never played the game before, it can be very intimidating. It can be very intimidating to get a grasp of it, and as you're watching, understand what's going on. Whereas you look on the right-hand side of the 2K League game, it's no different. It's one of the most globally recognized games in the world, and it's very easy to kind of figure out for even a casual fan. So that's one thing that our partners do like. The other one, which is very apparent, is you see on the scorers table, you see the Mountain Dew sign. It is super easy for us and very organic for us to activate partnerships in our game. It would actually feel more strange to not have courtside signage in the 2K experience. So it's very easy for us and the folks at the Wizards to kind of activate and integrate you into the game experience. And the last thing I would say that we're hearing from partners is they like the fact that we're rated E for everyone. We are a very fan-friendly, very family-friendly game, and they're very proud to put, insert partner here, their logo next to the NBA 2K League logo as well. So just some of the things we've been hearing from partners as we've talking to them. But I will say that we're certainly not just selling signage. The one thing I can tell you is there are endless amounts of content opportunities for partners to attach themselves to. Endless amounts. Whether it's our studio, there's plenty of opportunities there. There's opportunities in the virtual game itself. The stories of our gamers. I can't tell you how many different publications and people that are interested in hearing about the story of kind of that the equivalent of hoop dreams for esports. The player going from their house to pick your NBA city here to being a professional athlete. All of those stories are things we can attach attach content and partners to. And then the last thing I think I'd say, in terms of the community itself, I think the traditional sports can learn. The one thing they can learn the most from esports is access and the level of access they give to their community. So imagine, the best player on the Wizards NBA 2K League team, giving access to show how they run a pick and roll, how do they stop a great offensive player from scoring. All of those are the types of things that we now can, through streaming and we can give access to our fans and actually teach them how to play better in their own game. It's a really unique thing. I mean, you imagine the ability to, for John Wall to teach you how to shoot threes. I mean, that's exactly what we can do, through the virtual experience through 2K. So I'm happy to answer questions in a moment, but I don't want to leave you just a couple kind of key takeaways. One is, I mentioned with my 11-year-old son, whether it is the access to esports fans, access to NBA fans, or access to 2K players themselves. There's a multitude of new opportunities and new doors that are opened through the 2K League. Secondly, 2K is a great partner for us in this. It is a great marriage, and a lot of that is based on the fact that they have an endless thirst to innovate. And whether it is season 1, season 2, season 3, they are going to continue to push us as a partner to make sure we're always staying ahead of the curve and being cutting edge, like Ted mentioned earlier. And lastly is, we know what a successful league looks like. and whether it is trying to activate partners, or how to do dynamic storytelling. These are all things that are in our wheelhouse from having done it for the last 70+ years at the NBA. So this is just another chance for us to help our partners enter into a new space. And so we're excited to do that with all of you. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. But with that, that's all I got. Any questions?
So we can have one or two questions real quick, and then we'll continue with the program. Yeah, just right here.
So all I can speak to is how the NBA 2K League will approach it. We're really, we're not engaging. At the very beginning, we're going to sit on the sideline and see, kind of how our league progresses, and we're going to choose, at least in year one, to sit on the sideline and not pursue that.
Okay, well, you will be around after for a little bit to answer any questions if you don't want to ask them in the grand opening here. But thank you again to Brendan. Okay, so we've heard a little bit about the NBA 2K League as a whole. It's an interesting venture. It's going to be an interesting thing for both NBA fans and esports fans collectively to get interested in. But now we want to get to the specifics, to Wizards Gaming. And who better than a former gamer himself, Grant Parangjape, the Director of Esports Business and Team Operations for Monumental Sports Entertainment. Give it up for Grant.
Thanks, Dan. So I just wanted to start out by echoing, I think, what Ted and Brendan have said. Really appreciate everyone joining us here today, both in person and online. So I think we've heard a lot about esports in general, how the landscape is kind of pictured, and how it's structured. And we want to dive into a little bit about 2K specifically, and then how it relates to our 2K team here in DC. So I think a good place to start off with, and I'm sure a question on everyone's mind. There is a team name and brand unveiling coming soon. We don't have an exact timing window on that yet, but more on that coming soon. So this is a placeholder for now. So I think we'll touch on this really quickly, and Ted did a great job kind of setting the stage for this. But how exactly a team fits into the esports landscape is really important from a branding perspective, right? So teams in the general esports ecosystem, we have Monumental, we have Team Liquid, Caps. They're the ones who sign rights to players, and players end up eventually playing for those teams. And that's going to be the same for our 2K team. So they will live and breathe the same as any of our other franchises here. They'll have access to our sports psychologist, our nutritionist, our dietitian. It is the same as if there was any other athlete, and they will be treated the exact same way. From there, you have a lot of different kind of arrows and integrations that layer the landscape. So we'll start at the top, brands. I know a number of you in this room kind of represent that pool on our slide. So brands have a number of ways that they can kind of be involved in esports, right? Whether it's through a team sponsorship, which is kind of an angle that we have here at Monumental, but you also have opportunities to activate with publishers, activate at the league level, with the NBA 2K League as a whole, and then also by sponsoring and working with some of the media publishers, whether that's Twitch or YouTube or Facebook there. So there's a number of different ways to get involved, and we're going to primarily focus on how you could engage in a team sponsorship here at 2K, here at Wizards 2K. So we'll dive right in. So I think a good place to start, and I know Brendan hit on some of these numbers earlier, but like he mentioned, 2K is the best-selling sports title in the entire U.S. So they have over 9 million copies sold, 1.6 million active users daily, a great demographic range between 18 to 34, with 63% of their total demo falling in that age range. So it is primarily, male-dominated as well, but it really represents a great opportunity to reach kind of a difficult-to-reach age group for a lot of brands out there in the space. So just a few more stats, kind of level setting here. Who exactly the audience is. We do have that kind of 80 million that we have access to. These are all your basketball fans within the U.S. And then you also have kind of 10.3 million who are only esports fans, and then 9.6 who kind of lie in the middle. So for 2K League, it really represents an opportunity to reach all of those fans, whether you're a fan of basketball only, whether you're a fan of esports only, or whether you watch both. So that's really kind of the unique selling proposition that we have here for 2K League. So how exactly does a brand get involved? And I think we'll kind of start things off by saying the most important thing you can do from the brand perspective is activate authentically. There is no forgiving in esports, and if you do not do it authentically, it will be very challenging going forward. So I think a few of the opportunities we have, and why 2K is so exciting is you really do have that opportunity to develop an authentic connection with an entirely new audience for your brands. Whether that's esports enthusiasts only, whether that's fans who might not have watched basketball or other traditional sports before, you really have access to an entirely new fan base. Again, this is kind of an opportunity to be a founding partner. So whether it's trying to compare an NFL or an NBA sponsorship to 2K League, this is really kind of an opportunity to get in on something brand new and very exciting from our perspective. I think it's been echoed a few times, but it is very brand friendly. It is rated E for everyone, which you don't see for a lot of other esports titles, whether it's Counter-Strike or Call of Duty, where there is that concern of violence as well. And then I think, with the linkage here that we have to Monumental Sports Network and Monumental Sports Entertainment as a whole, we really do have access to a lot of resources that endemic teams don't. So whether that's producing in-house content, whether that's through our branding, and again, through our activations for different partners, it is really kind of an all-inclusive experience for us. So there's a number of partnership opportunities that we're going to kind of run through here over the next couple of slides. So like Brendan mentioned, there is the virtual courtside signage. From the team perspective, that would be for all regular season and playoff games. There is also the virtual jersey patch. So for those of you who have been following along, the Wizards are one of the teams who don't currently have a jersey patch sponsor. But there is also a virtual jersey patch in the game, which would be on all of our players' jerseys in the game. You also then have the out-of-game jersey for players. So, the physical jerseys that our 5 guys will be wearing when they're sitting in the studio, practicing in the house. There's a number of opportunities to activate around that physical piece of clothing. And then I think probably one of the most exciting areas, team-organized grassroots events. So, local activations in our markets, whether that's around content, whether that's with other franchise players. There's a number of cool things that we can do from a team perspective there. And we'll get into these a little bit more, but there's also a number of digital and social content opportunities that I think are really exciting for esports. It's a great way to kind of reach a mass audience and do it in a very authentic way. So this is just kind of a cool example of what some of the in-game inventory looks like from a rotational signage and static signage perspective. There's a number of in-game opportunities. I think like Brendan mentioned, working with 2K kind of really allows us to do almost anything. So if it was something that you wanted your brand on the shirts that get shot out of the cannon at halftime, you can do that. If you want little balloons, dropping shirts, with your brand on it, you can do that too. So there's a number of content, number of in-game opportunities that you don't find in esports anywhere else. You can't do this in League of Legends. You can't do this in Dota 2. You can't do this in Call of Duty. And it's a really authentic and kind of unique activation for 2K League. So this is, again, just an example of what a player jersey would look like. So this is a little different than your traditional sports jersey, right? So in the NBA, you have the one patch. And I know it was a very big deal when that was added. In esports, you've had multiple sponsors on jerseys since the beginning of time, right? You'll have 1 on the chest, you'll have 2 on the shoulders, you'll have 4 on the sleeves. So there's a number of opportunities around the physical jersey that the players wear, which is a little outside the box for traditional sports. And it adds a little, it adds a little bit of, flavor to what the players are wearing and really kind of provides a little bit of authenticity to them being a pro gamer. So these are just a few of the ideas that we've been kind of working with in terms of local grassroots events for our players and our franchise. So having the 2K team out to events with other franchise players, whether it's a signing session or a viewing party. So like we talked about, all of the games will be played out of a central studio, so you can't go to Cap One to watch. So we'll be looking at putting on a series of watch parties for both our partners and then also fans of our 2K team to enjoy, whether that's at a bar or a restaurant or even here inside the arena as well. And again, it is kind of a long-term activation in terms of you have 15 weeks. It is kind of an opportunity to keep activating at multiple different touch points. So just a few examples of what social activations can look like from an esports and a 2K perspective. Whether it's after game highlights or score recaps, also classic giveaways, of course. I think the one thing you'll find though is it has a different feel when these activations come from a 2K team or from an esports organization rather than from a brand account or from a traditional organization's account. Players have very authentic relationships with their fans, and it's a lot closer than you might find with a fan of John Wall and John Wall himself. You'll have players who respond to tweets when fans tweet at them and get upset at a loss or question if this product is worth it, and it really does kind of all lend itself to that conversational buying style that so many millennials and digital natives have. So this is a really cool kind of authentic way to really reach that audience. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention Monumental Sports Network and kind of the great opportunity that represents. So whether it's original programming or really kind of branded content, there's a lot of work that we can do with our we have the largest production staff in the NBA, and there's a lot of work that we can do from that perspective in terms of creating co-branded content and really kind of authentically aligning a brand with our 2K team. Speaking of which, we had a few ideas that we wanted to share as well. So whether that's an exhibition with some of the other 2K teams and having a co-branded content series there, there will be kind of a lot of time in between when we draft the team and the season actually kicks off in May to create content around their training sessions. What's it like meeting a professional dietitian or sports psychologist, and kind of what does that really look like from a 2K player's perspective. I think going back to the conversational nature of esports and kind of aligning brands with those consumers, having live conversations, whether it's on Discord or on Reddit, there's a number of ways that our players can kind of engage with their fans and also promote a brand in a very authentic way. And I think just all of the content opportunities kind of all boil down to we're open to ideas more than anything else. There is no rule book in terms of what content is possible and what content is normal in esports. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity to both work with a partner in creating really authentic content and also creating something new and cool that really hasn't been done before. So with that, I'd like to kind of wrap things up from my end. Appreciate everyone kind of sticking with us. We're going to transition over to the panel portion of today's talks, and I'll bring up Dan to kind of introduce the panelists.
I'd actually like all the panelists to just come up right now. We'll all sit down.
All right.
Where do you want me?
You want me on the end? I think you're
Are we
closer, yeah.
Oh.
All right, well, as Grant alluded to, it is now time for the panel portion where we discuss esports, Wizards NBA 2K Summit, kind of an overall analysis of the world of esports and the information that we can gather and help you understand today. From left to right here, we'll just go down the line. Jens Hilgers, the founder of ESL, Dojo Madness, and Bitcraft Esports Ventures. Immediately to the left here, We're going to go down the line. Apologies for this. James Altman, Director of Publishing Operations for Bethesda Softworks. Zach Leonsis, the General Manager and Senior Vice President of Wizards Esports Strategic Initiatives, as well as Monumental Sports Network. And then, of course, Grant Paranchape, who you just heard from, the Director of Wizards Esports Business and Team Operations. James, I actually want to start with you. So Bethesda Softworks, one of the most established, well-respected publishers in the gaming industry. I guess my question for you is, where does esports fit into the Bethesda Softworks global strategy?
Well, it's very important for the global strategy because, it gets more eyeballs on your game. So right now, everyone is fighting for eyeballs. Every content maker is fighting for eyeballs, whether it's film, television, games, and esports allows for just more people to be talking about your games, talking about gameplay itself, talking about competitions, talking about the athletes, specific tournaments, and it keeps your game in the discussion, general discussion in the industry for longer. So for that reason, it's really important. The other thing is it really builds a community around your game, and it keeps them playing and it keeps them engaged. So, for example, we have a game called Quake. And Quake was originally developed and published in 1996. It's generally considered the first ever esport because in 1996, a group of people organized a LAN party together in Dallas, Texas, had competitions, and those competitions have been going every year since then, including this year when we had our first ever Quake World Championships at QuakeCon. And it's that community that is constantly talking about your game, constantly playing your game, that caused our first ever tournament that we broadcasted publicly on Twitch to have over 6 million viewers. So it's that sort of power that esports has to really push your game in the marketplace and allow more people to view and play your game.
Absolutely. The viewership numbers I hear time and time again, the tens of millions for various tournaments, obviously the League of Legends, the Super Bowl comparison lives in that sense. I really want to know how esports also factors kind of into the development phase within your company, if you could just shed some light on that.
Sure. So not every game is going to be an esport, but in today's video game ecosystem, something that has become increasingly important is the viewability of a game. Not just the playability, but the viewability. So how easy is it for streamers to stream? How easy is it for people to watch on Twitch? So whether a game is viewable is increasingly something we focus on while we're developing. Whether something makes a good esport is not only does it have to be viewable, but it also has to be competitive. So not all of our games, like I said, are esports, but those that have competitive elements that are also easy to view and watch on platforms like Twitch and Steam and Twitter, it's those elements that we focus on when we're developing.
Jens, you're considered to be the godfather of esports, if I'm allowed to call you that here. So,
I'm not sure.
Do you mind being
so? Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm going to go ahead and call you the godfather from now on then here. So you were the founder of ESL, and I think the simple question here is, where did the inspiration come from to found that organization initially?
Well, it was basically the game that James just described. It was Quake that inspired me. I was an avid video gamer for quite a long time, but I played mostly sort of multiplayer games that back in the days, like in the 90s, you played on a split screen, so you watch at like one screen and you would play a game together with watching one screen. And Quake was really the first game that truly changed that with kind of the networking engine and the physics engine that it was providing, which was really kind of next generation, that allowed it for a truly global user base to compete in real time in one virtual world from different locations. And that was really, really game-changing. Sort of playing the game myself, I got adrenalized in a way that I've never felt it with other games. I caught myself sort of watching over the shoulders when others of my friends were playing the game in a way I've never perceived it. And I felt that kind of the level of training and intensity in the game, like the more time you would spend with a game, yet like the deeper the game got, right? And that's kind of a really important characteristic of esports games, that they have to provide sufficient strategic depth so that you can really unfold and deliver skill over a long, sustained time period. And that's an important design characteristic that goes in there. So that was really kind of, it was a single game that kind of got me to kind of, this really feels like sports, right? And for me, kind of esports are sort of the marriage of the fascinating worlds of Hollywood, I want to say, with the competitive dynamic of sports. Like when you fuse these both, it explodes to esports.
You've been around this esports world since the late 90s. It's blown up over the past several years. Quite frankly, it's a billion-dollar industry. There's a lot going into it, whether it's development for individual games, whether it's the leagues, like we're introduced today for the NBA 2K League. How have you seen esports grow over the past 2 decades?
Well, first and foremost, I saw it growing awfully slow. Like when I was building ESL, when we were starting out, kind of we like our office was literally in Cologne, Germany. So I'm from Germany. I started to build this all in Europe, and our office was next to this big indoor arena, Lanxess Arena in Cologne. It's called, about 30,000 capacity. And my dream was like 3 years from now we're going to fill up this arena with, I don't know, 20,000 people, and they're going to watch the players on stage, right? That dream didn't really come true that way in 3 years. It was like still 50, 60 people in a basement that we were showing our games to. So kind of 15, now 20 years later, I had to realize that kind of one of the most important drivers is really that esports is growing with the digital natives. It's growing with the young generations that grow up with video games in the first place. And I was probably one of the biggest geeks around, and I thought there was way more than myself, and those who were not playing video games the way that I would do, I could sort of show what we're doing to them. It's going to be great for them. It wasn't really that way. So this is sort of a reminder that the growth of esports that we're seeing today is primarily a growth that is being driven and is kind of carried forward by new generations growing up with video games, with kind of esports for them, kind of getting exposed to video games early in their life, is something that comes off natural. So I think that's something that tells you a lot about how esports is growing going forward. But at the same time, it was one of my biggest challenges. Like I had to sort of build kind of my own consumer while I was building the product, right? It took a long time to grow all this. 20 years ago, it felt a bit lonely.
Over the course of tonight, we've heard Ted, Grant, Brendan, everyone has mentioned this has become a global phenomenon. Now, you're still based in Germany. The rest of us are in the DMV area. Shout out to the DMV, obviously. But I'd like not just you, Jens, but the entire panel to comment on where you've seen this kind of blow up on a global scale. It's no longer just in specific areas. It's become something huge. So if each of you could comment on the global expansion, the international reach of esports.
You want to start off, Jens?
How do I give this the best shot? So I think what's great about esports is that the games that we play oftentimes get designed by video games developers with a view of the global markets in the first place. Like when they design the game, they look at how can they design the game so that a Chinese audience, a Korean audience, a Japanese audience to some extent, that they would like a game and gameplay and the characters in the game equally as kind of their US counterparts, which is where still most of the great IP is being created in the games industry. So that said, these games typically, like talk esports games, have a global appeal and grow globally. Now there's some countries that oftentimes South Korea is being mentioned as one of the sort of early adopters in esports and the driving forces in esports. And yes, that's true, but I want to remind people that there is some special circumstances that came together in the Asian region, specifically in South Korea, that made them grow so fast in esports. And that is that to a big extent, in countries like South Korea, I'd say a well-defined sports entertainment industry and sports industry is lacking. So when the young people get out and search for entertainment content, video games are actually filling a hole which is not easy to be filled in the US, because here sports are deeply rooted into the entire society in your educational system. Like in many Asian countries, that was not the case. So esports actually have a much more fertile ground, I'd say, to grow on. Second, it is a country that has invested a lot in the early 2000s since the late 90s into digital infrastructure. So kind of high-speed broadband internet connections and kind of digital kind of TV directly to your home kind of helped forging and accelerating the growth of esports a lot. So kind of there was a couple of really great circumstances coming together, making South Korea a kind of a breeding ground for esports, and it's still churning out some of the best talent on the planet. And I think some of these factors you still see coming together in other Asian markets. And I'm very grateful for that. I think one of the beauty in esports is that we are a truly global sport, and that global communities of different color and different region and different culture are coming together in esports, regardless of origin, and celebrate the same game. I think that's terrific.
Well, people all over the world play games. We heard Ted talk about that a little bit. Everyone is playing. The online connected population is enormous. And so when we're developing games, we really do focus on localizing the game for different audiences, making minor changes to art styles or to characters so that the game will appeal not just to North American consumers, but also Europeans. And not just Europeans, but to the French as distinct from the Germans. We have to have language support for each of those. Then you'll have games that need to be localized in certain ways for Japan versus Southeast Asia versus China. So games are incredibly global in their nature, and the development of those games is intended to address a global audience. The other thing is that with the rise of fast speed internet, you've been able to have people compete all over the world with each other. So, for example, with Quake Champions, yet again, we recently had a competitor in one of our recent tournaments qualify in an online tournament while playing in Australia. That's not an easy thing because there is lag in the time it takes for when he presses a button and shoots his gun for the message to get sent to the server in North America that he was playing on and sent back. So he's actually playing a version of the game that's about 200 milliseconds slower than his competitor, which is incredibly challenging from a competition perspective. But it's with the speed of the internet today, you've been able to have people compete all over the world, from Australia to Europe to Russia to China, and all compete and play in the same ecosystem and environment. So that's been an incredible thing that has allowed competitive video gaming to kind of go even more global.
We should start by saying thanks to Jens for flying in from Berlin for the day to do this with us. It was very nice of you.
Thanks for having me. This is great city.
Jens, for those of you who aren't familiar, really is a godfather in the space. I mean, he's been there from the inception, so we're really lucky to have him. And then James, little closer commute for you, coming in from Rockville, but James is incredibly modest. Bethesda Softworks publishes some of the biggest and most popular video games on the planet, doing quite literally billions and billions and billions of dollars in revenue with titles like Fallout and Wolfenstein. Skyrim, just to name a few. Actually, Skyrim features our PA announcers at Capitals games.
He
Wes
does.
Johnson as a voice, as a character.
Wes Johnson appears in several of our games.
Yes, so multiple connections to Monumental here. But I say this sitting directly behind a global partnerships backdrop. Being global is truly, I think, one of the greatest things about esports. You hear about all these streaming numbers, and the reason why they're so big is because the streams are happening simultaneously across the world. And that's something that digital streaming services are uniquely positioned to provide. Most traditional sports leagues, we have territorial rights, national deals with national providers, and then international deals. When a team streams through Twitch or YouTube or the like, it's accessible anywhere. The other thing that I find so special about the global nature of esports is, if you hear about a player scoring 50 points in this college division or this high school league, and then you go, well, if he played in this division, he'd only score 10 points. This division or this conference or this league is way better. In esports, your score is your score no matter where you are. And so you can look at the scoreboard and see how players are stacking up. And you get these global superstars rising very quickly. You see a 16-year-old player all of a sudden who's showing great progress for the average 16-year-old score, and oh my gosh, we have to sign them to our Team Liquid or whatnot. And similar things will happen with the 2K League. I know that we'll find the best 85 players on the planet. Eventually, we'll add more teams to the league. We'll add more players. I think having that international flavor from a player pool to draft from will be one of the more interesting parts about our team dynamic, and one of the most exciting things from a content perspective as well.
Yeah, I think, a lot of what these guys have said covers why esports is so global. But, I think I would just add, having, 10 years ago, nobody would have envisioned having a global draft for a title, right? You have North American LCS, you have European LCS, you have LCK in Korea. Esports has been very regionalized for very, a number of years now. And so I think, when you look at a title like, NBA 2K18 and you look like a league, you look at a league like NBA 2K League and you see, they're going outside the box. They're going with a truly global perspective in that any player from any corner of the world who has a copy of NBA 2K18 can try out and potentially join a professional NBA team. It's truly something very unique and speaks to kind of the commitment that the 2K League is putting on kind of, making sure we have a really fantastic esports experience.
Zach, you have worked with a number of professional sports teams over the years. I think that is an understatement to say the least. Over the several years you've worked at Monumental Sports Entertainment, 2K League comes about. What makes you interested in getting involved in the new NBA 2K League?
A handful of things, and I think Brendan touched on these, so I'll try not to regurgitate too much. It is a brand new audience, though. We will have some crossover with the traditional NBA audience and the Wizards audience, and that'll be incredibly important, particularly as the franchise is geographically based here in the DMV. We'll be proudly representing our community and region and trying to bring home a championship for our fans. But it's also reaching this brand new generation of fans who probably don't attend games. They probably won't be coming to the Caps game tonight. They probably won't be attending the Wizards game. And so from our perspective, we have a good handle on the existing generation of fans. We have a huge footprint in Washington. Our leagues have huge footprints domestically and internationally. The NBA and us alike are realizing that there's a new generation to come that we need direct touch points with. We talk a lot about developing direct-to-consumer businesses and applications, and esports provides a huge opportunity to do that, and it's an audience business. It's about scale as opposed to subscriptions with the live event programming and the content as well, and digital really allows for you to do that. I mean, you guys saw the stats up there that the average gamer or 2K gamer games for 90 minutes a day. Think about carving out 90 minutes of every day of your life for something. I mean, most of you are like getting stressed by the thought, looking at your Outlook calendar, how can I fit 90 minutes into this day and that day? Well, I have 90 minutes a day. So that is unbelievably passionate and interested in this. So we are going to treat these players just like we would any of our other players on our other teams. We will treat them as athletes. We will treat them with the respect that they deserve. Grant mentioned that we want to lend them, access to our team, Caps and Wizards team nutritionists and whatnot, and trainers. That's very true. We'll be building out a training facility, making sure that they have great housing and accommodations. We want them to be comfortable. We want them to be healthy. We want them to be real professionals so that they can play at the very top skill level in the world.
And within this organization, you see the Wizards, you see the Mystics, you see the new G League team with GoGo. Now you see the 2K Sports team. What do you think Monumental represents here as far as the new age consumer, the digital consumer, as Jens said earlier?
Yeah, I mean, between the traditional sports, our partnership with NBC Sports Washington, the launch of our own OTT network and Monumental Sports Network, I think that we're really able to create a platform that's absolutely accessible no matter who you are, where you're from, what you subscribe to, what you're interested in. We really try to talk about our organization as holding up a mirror to our community. And we want to be reflective of the community and its needs. And one of the things we take great pride in is that our community is disproportionately younger compared to most of the other major 30 markets in the United States. About a couple of years ago, I always talked about 33% of our population is made up of millennials or Gen Z. That number's actually increased. Now we're about 35%, right? So these are the consumers who are opting to not subscribe to cable, instead subscribe to Netflix and whatnot. Instead of tuning into a playoff game, they're opting to tune into the LCS. And soon enough, they'll be tuning in for NBA 2K playoff games as well. And we want to be there to satisfy the demands and needs of that next generation of customer.
Grant, we heard from Jens already 2 decades of experience as far as what's changed since the late 90s to today. You've kind of gone through a much shorter time period, but a whirlwind of a change. You're a former player, then you go to school, then you come out and you have the business side of esports now. Kind of walk us through your path to where you are here today.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good question and a good point. So I think, a lot of people out there always ask, how do you get into esports? Do you major in esports at college? Do you major in a business degree? And I like to say, there really isn't a path to getting into esports. So, I used to play World of Warcraft professionally way back in 8th grade. I am that exact consumer that Zach was talking about. I've never owned a cable package. I hadn't been to a Caps game until I came here 3 months ago. I hadn't been to an NHL game until I came here 3 months ago even. And I was fortunate enough to go to school, and I was actually a pre-med major. Again, still playing way too many video games in college, and still very focused on pursuing esports, but was a little bit more realistic with what I thought was possible back then. And really it talks to kind of the change that esports has undergone. It wasn't a career that I could have pursued 5 or 6 years ago and gone home and said, hey, mom and dad, I'm a director of esports. That wasn't really something that you did. When I finished my MBA, I was kind of fortunate enough to get a role at an endemic team, very similar to Team Liquid, called Splice. I did business development for them for about a year and a half until I was, fortunate enough to find this opportunity and start 3 months ago. But I think, working for an endemic team and then moving over to, an organization like Monumental that has, the resources and the scale and the expertise to, run franchises is a whirlwind of difference, right? So, just looking at how we, are planning our accommodations for our players, putting on this event even, was something that an endemic team couldn't even, have hoped to do. We have a team that sells sponsorships. It used to just be me, right? So there's a lot of, growth that comes with, a larger organization, and I think it really has done a lot to kind of accelerate esports as an industry.
I asked Zach this question because I wanted to hear the kind of pro sports perspective on this, but for you, I'll ask the same thing. What makes the new NBA 2K League interesting to you, and why do you think people should be interested in getting involved with this in some capacity?
Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons, and I won't echo too many what Zach said, but I think the biggest thing for me, coming from a traditional esports background, it's just the competitiveness of it, right? So, the same as you look at a league like LCS, or you look at a league like, Dota, you look at Dota 2 or CSGO, and you have players that are very skilled at the game and very competitive in all of their matches. You see that across NBA 2K. You have players playing 9 to 12 hours a day. Right now, not even, they're not paid. They're not, professional players signed with a team. And it's kind of that level of competition that I think we're excited to bring to Monumental and have under, one of our franchises. And it's really what excites me about 2K League.
Jens, you make trips now to the United States around every 4 to 5 weeks, I think you told me earlier. Whereas originally you could cover a lot of your work at home in Germany. To touch on the global impact once again, has this become more of a necessity to drive not only the national but the global revenue of your various esports investments that you've partook in, I should say, over the past couple of years?
So absolutely yes. I mean, I'd say the creative capital of the esports industry is to a very big extent located on the West Coast in the United States. Like some of the best IP in the video games industry comes out of sort of the greater area of Los Angeles, where you find a lot of the largest and best game studios on the planet. So it is a place where I necessarily need to spend a lot of money, and by necessarily it doesn't imply that it's a bad place to be. Like I love to travel out to the West Coast of the U.S. At the same time, it's kind of I'd say a focal point of the entertainment industry, obviously, right there in Los Angeles, and that's just kind of a lot of factors coming together, sort of defining Los Angeles, I'd say, as the Western epicenter, as the US epicenter of esports. So it's a good reason to get out there. In Asia, I'd probably say the equivalent is Shanghai, and in Europe, you probably want to say it's Berlin. Like that's probably the three cities that have the biggest impact in Asia, Europe, and the US in sort of esports right now. So a good reason for me to spend a lot of time in Los Angeles, yes.
And you also said New York. It's become an expanding market in the United States outside of just LA, but coming obviously to DC today, to New York City. It's not just one city in the United States anymore. There are a variety of areas nationally that have become players in the global scheme of things.
Yeah, so that's I think a very exciting development. Like in the past, I would have said, like, you know, esports has this great thing where we don't really need this regionalization thing. Like I'd actually be questioning, isn't it great that in esports we don't have that? Like, is that actually something good in general, that sort of you need to rally around a city? Is that something that millennials or somebody like really truly still needs or wants? Isn't it greater if he could follow values rather than a city name in the first place? Doesn't that put more pressure on esports teams to build themselves up on values and define themselves by values instead of a city in the first place? So it's sort of say, like, it was something great about esports that you didn't have regionalization, and I would sort of challenge whether it was great overall. Now I'm a bit more on the side, like there's actually something great about probably esports getting more regionalized over time. And I'm curious to see how it plays out going forward, and very sort of, I'd say, excited about teams, specifically existing traditional sports teams, bringing their experience in local and regional activations to the table, and fusing that with what we have learned in esports. So it's great to now see esports taking away to other cities, really getting a foothold in those cities, and local actors encouraging esports development in these cities.
And Jens brings up a great point. James, I assume this would impact you. You mentioned earlier that the language barrier does have some impact in the development and distribution of various games for the company. But this idea that perhaps there isn't as much of a language barrier as we've seen in the past, according to other, if we want to focus on sports in terms of today's panel discussion, that must have an interesting impact not only on game development, but also on global revenue overall.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, sorry, it was a poorly worded question, my apologies. But it seems like the language barrier that is a part of the development of the various games that you put together over time, while it is something that's accounted for, the beauty of esports in general that Jens had mentioned was perhaps the language barrier doesn't as much come into play as far as the geographic areas, but has become more of a global impact overall. And I was curious how that impacted
the language barrier doesn't always come into play. We actually have a lot of people in China who will play our games in English. We have a very healthy modding community that will take our games and actually translate them themselves and just put it up for free on the internet. Hey, download this patch for your game, and it'll turn your game from the subtitles in English to subtitles in simplified Chinese. And there you go. And that's the power of the communities that exist around these games. They'll support each other. They'll say, wouldn't it be cool if you could have this power or this capability in the game? They'll make the mods themselves, and they'll share them with the broader gaming community. And that actually keeps people more and more engaged in our games.
I think Jens and James are both hinting at the power of how organically these games and these followings have blossomed. And I think that's what has driven the engagement and such fervent passion for the titles. And it's what we will try to rally around as a 2K league, around the audience that's already there. We're hopefully putting them on a booster seat and celebrating the interest that they have already created in this game. I think that being organic, pitching yourself as an authentic and good actor is very, very important, because these communities have built something wonderful. And my dad mentioned, to start the summit off, we want to be light touch in many respects and follow the playbook and stay on the rails for what's already been built before us.
You've done a lot of research to get involved with the NBA 2K League. Not only that, but various other esports ventures within Monumental Sports Entertainment. What's one thing that you think most people don't understand about the world of esports?
Just how big it is. Just how big it is. I think that 2 to 3 years ago, I used to say, esports is the biggest thing you've never heard of. Now I think the cat's out of the bag. I think a lot of people have heard about esports. I think people are still trying to figure out how the ecosystem works. I hope that through a summit like this, for people in the room and potentially streaming online, that you've gotten good perspective from publishers, from tournament organizers and media networks, from professional sports teams ownership, league management and leadership, and then team directors and operators as well, because I won't lie to you, it's complicated. It's a complicated universe to try to figure out, and frankly, we spent over a year interviewing and getting to know people at all different layers of the ecosystem, and the one thing that really arose was the importance of credibility, the importance of respecting the audience, because there's something really, really special here. It's unusual to have a culminating community-wide event like the one we had a month ago in Beijing at the World Championships for League of Legends, where you have nearly 55,000 people in a stadium and 100 million people watching online. Those events are few and far between, and so just because maybe you're not playing an esport, I think it is important for everyone to know about, because it's here to stay, it's continuing to grow, it's something that I think will eventually get passed down from generation to generation. You saw Brendan playing with his son Carter in the opening to his presentation. That's a story that you will see more and more and more of. So I think the size and scope does surprise people when they first start to dig in and learn a little bit more about the space.
Well, some of the statistics are actually remarkable. More people today watch video games, not play, watch people playing video games. More people watch than watch Hulu, ESPN, Netflix combined. It's over 600 million people that are just watching games. Dota 2 is one of the most popular video games in esports that's out there. Last year, more people watched the International, the grand final of the Dota 2 championships, than watched Game 7 of the NBA Finals. It's a remarkably big audience, and that, like Zach said, is something most people don't quite understand.
James referenced a tournament called the International, and there was a prize pool of $25 million. It was in a sold-out arena in Seattle, 20,000 or 18,000 people, with an additional 10,000 people outside watching the matches that were happening on big screens. And everyone goes, well, where did they get the $25 million from? They got it through crowdfunding. The audience was so passionate about the title Dota 2 that they were willing to put up that money. We were very lucky in that Team Liquid won first place in that tournament and won a first place grand prize of $11.8 million. It was the biggest payout in esports history for a tournament, which is really, really remarkable. So it's big, it's engaged people and fans.
It takes an incredible community built up around a game to crowdfund $25 million. And that's all on in-game items. That's all on cosmetic things that you can buy and make your in-game avatar look really cool. Spend all that money and knowing it goes to esports, knowing it's going to this competition, which you're going to watch with all your friends. It's an incredible and passionate community, and games just in general are very sticky content. People like to stick with them.
Yeah. James and Zach have both referenced these large events, and so I think this is a good opportunity to compare and contrast a little bit. What is the difference between a regular professional sporting event and an esports sporting event? Anybody can answer this one.
I'll take a stab at that one.
Okay. All right.
one thing I notice when I go to a big esports event is that it becomes a little bit like a convention at some points too. You see fans coming to our game tonight, and there'll be 15,000 red jerseys. It's fabulous. You go to an esports event, and people are dressed up as the characters, and they might be bringing their own computers or consoles to play in the concourse level in between matches and whatnot. James mentioned an interesting stat that there are a ton of people who don't even play the game but are really addicted to watching. The same thing is true of professional sports. I'm a crummy basketball player, but I watch a lot of NBA. The same is true in esports, but the people who are coming to these tournaments and the like, they play too. And so there's a opportunity to gather in person as opposed to online that I think a lot of these events attract. That's very tribal in nature, attracts a very passionate fan base. I think it's quite powerful.
Yeah, and I think I'll add, the engagement level at an esports event is actually, almost more engaging than a traditional sporting event. You might go out to the game later tonight, and in between periods, you'll see a pretty empty arena, or you'll see people on their phones. You go to the LCS, World Championship, nobody's on their phone except to tweet that they're there. Really, nobody gets up even between games because they want to see their favorite players, just sitting on stage and warming up, or looking to see what they did wrong in the last match. So esports events have really kind of done a phenomenal job engaging fans throughout the entire course of the event that I think even traditional sports can learn from, and it's certainly something that they'll have some creative ideas from, I'm sure.
A lot of those events are also broadcast online, which creates a very different environment. So rather than broadcasting over your traditional television networks, almost all esports events are broadcast on platforms like Twitch. And the Twitch community is very active in the chat window. There's a chat window that sits right next to the game window. So you're watching the game, there's a scrolling chat of people just typing messages to each other. That they're talking about the game. They're talking about what's going on. There's a Twitch chat going on right now. They're probably talking and making fun of me.
Shout outs to Twitch chat right now for us. Thanks, guys.
So they're a very active online community, and that's another element that's very different. And another big one is there are technical issues that need to be dealt with when dealing with esports. Fundamentally, esports is software. It is computer code. That is what the sport is built on. So it's not 5 guys on a court and a ball. It is very complex software with very complex code that interfaces between the different competitors. And so you require very specific staff and skill and equipment to maintain servers and to maintain the connections and to be sure that everything is up and running appropriately so you can host your event. Also, you have online tournaments where a lot of, you'll have maybe a tournament that's part offline, part online, where people qualify for the tournament in an online format. So they're playing, a guy in LA versus a guy in DC, or a guy in Australia versus a guy in North America. And it's the technical complications that arise as part of an online environment that are very different than traditional sports.
At this time, we'd love to open up for some Q&A. There will be a microphone that will be going around the room. I would ask that you wait to ask your question until the microphone reaches you. And then I guess we'll open up for any questions for the panelists. Well, one question I have. I guess final thoughts here, guys, on the entirety of today's presentation, whether it be esports, Wizards NBA 2K. Some final thoughts on what we've discussed today. Graham, we can start with you.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I can say is just stay tuned for more about our 2K team and a lot of the work that we're going into. I'll give a shout out to Brendan. He's hosting an AMA on the 2K subreddit tomorrow. So I'd encourage anybody who's interested in learning more about the 2K League to tune into that. And then I think we're just very excited about what's to come here. NBA 2K League really does represent a pretty phenomenal opportunity in terms of, it's the perfect intersection between, traditional sports and esports. And I think, fans of a truly global audience are going to be really excited with what we have in store.
Thanks to all of you for coming together in person today to learn a little bit more. I hope that you have a better understanding of esports in general and why we're so excited about the 2K League and our new 2K team. Obviously, we're excited. I think it's reflective of our larger company's mission to be cutting edge, innovative, reach our full community, and also touch base with that next generation of fan. This is a great opportunity to engage with us in reaching younger customers.
As a final thought, I guess if you don't know much about esports, try watching. If you didn't know about rugby, it'd be hard to. You could sit down with someone who does, and you just watch the game. You understand it. Go to twitch.tv. There are literally hundreds of games that you can choose from that people are streaming this second. There are probably hundreds of thousands of people playing games like League of Legends and PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. Just go online, twitch.tv, and start watching them. And that'll really give you a sense of what this community is like.
Yeah, I take that a step further. Like in my experience, the most eye-opening moment was when people actually went to the big esports events.
Yes.
So whenever one of these stadium events is in your vicinity, go out there, join one of these events, and this is gonna sort of not only blow you away, but like really open your eyes. Lastly, I guess, to be a bit encouraging, like a lot of people that look at esports in the first place are sort of a bit intimidated, like all of these different games, like it all doesn't work like in my traditional sports world, like how do I maneuver this space? And yes, it's challenging to understand this space, yet I think it also poses a great opportunity for people kind of really understanding what's happening there, kind of really getting engaged with the audience early on. Like I think you get yourself a lot of credits for kind of spending the time while we're still relatively early in this industry. And I actually hope that a lot of what some people consider kind of a challenge, which is that this space is it's dynamic, like sometimes it conflicts, oftentimes things actually change. A game will go and a new game will come. Like today, here's nobody that challenges the game of basketball by inventing basketball. Didn't happen, right? That's different in esports. There's gonna be somebody who invents a version of League of Legends that is probably 20-30% different than League of Legends, and it might just consume that audience within a year. We've seen this before. And kind of I really hope and I believe that these games will have a longevity and a sustainability that allows to build them over time. But our audience, our player base wants that change from time to time. They don't like the same game for 50 years. They don't. And they decide what game they play and what game they follow. And if you learn how to deal with that, you understand that audience. And that's really what this is about. Like, this is a next generation sport. Now is the time to understand it. And this is the way to engage with that audience the best. So really kind of try to get engaged, go to these events, and I'm quite sure you will be fascinated by what you find, and eventually, hopefully, well entertained. Thanks again for having me here in Washington.
Well, thank you, Jens, James, Zach, Grant. Remember, continue to stay involved. It's on the screen right here. The conversation continues. Hashtag Wizards 2K Summit. Make sure to stay involved. And again, if you go and tweet the hashtag, you have a chance to be entered to win 2 tickets to a future MSE event. Thank you also to Brendan and to Ted for speaking earlier today. This concludes today's panel discussion as well as the event as a whole. Remember, these guys are going to be floating around afterward. Continue to talk and ask questions about the esports world and NBA 2K League specifically. And if you're going to the Caps game, enjoy Let's Go Caps. Thanks, everyone.